Hey everyone, it's Jen.
And this is Lindsay.
And welcome back to Corpus Delicti, the podcast. We are still head into this cold case series. Every time we think that we are going to cut the series, more just pops up.
Yeah, we're way ahead right now. We have several outlines on deck ready to go. So when we say, y'all are probably like, wait, you've only done 4 or 5 so far, but we are working way ahead. But we have several on deck and we just keep finding more because there's just some wild stuff out there. And it's really interesting how some of these cold cases end up being solved. So we're going to go ahead and jump into another one. Just a heads up, this one does come with a trigger warning. There are details of sexual assault in here. So if that is not your thing, by all means, skip to a different episode. So we will go ahead and get started.
All right, this story is going to start fast. September 22nd, 1985, in Galena Park, Houston, Texas. This is where a 51-year-old Roy McCaleb was shot to death at close range around 10 p.m. while he was sleeping. The room is pitch black. It's in his house. It is dark. And they think that the gun was within inches of his head. If you are a true crime fanatic like the rest of us, you'll know that when a gun is close to the skin, it can leave burn marks, there's trace evidence. So there's a lot of things going on right here. We can scientifically tell if it was close enough to the skin when the gun was fired off. Roy, he was a construction foreman for about 20 years. He was living with his wife, KRIZAN-WILSON. She's 43. She's at home at the time. Also at home is one of her sons. Now, this is from a previous marriage. And her son was there with his girlfriend. They were all in the home at that time.
So Roy and CAROLYN had been married for just under 2 years. Before this, Roy, who was a Korean War veteran, had been married for 22 years, but the marriage ended after the death of their daughter. And their daughter was 23 years old. She had been diagnosed with Friedreich's ataxia, which is a neurological disease, and something like that, everyone grieves differently, and it can be really hard on couples, and they did split after that. So after the split, he meets CAROLYN on the job, and CAROLYN was a retired Houston Police Department civilian employee, and she, after that, worked in the Montgomery Elementary School cafeteria for a time, and she attended a cowboy church. So this romance starts, they get married. So now there's this blended family. They're living with one of CAROLYN's sons at this time, and that's who is in the house this evening. Now, naturally, the police interview the 3 people who were in the home at the time. So CAROLYN, the son, and the son's girlfriend. And CAROLYN actually has a lot of details to talk about here.
She tells the police that a homeless-looking man who is barefoot, he's grimy, he broke into the home just before 10 o'clock that evening. This man rapes her and then shoots her husband. She says that originally this man came in wearing gloves. He's holding a knife, which was held to her throat while she was sexually assaulted. She says that she was tortured, and she's going to be tortured with hot wax and a coat hanger, and threatened to perform worse punishment if she just did not obey him. She showed the police the hanger. She showed them the blood and the scratches on her body. Now, there's a lot of blood, but she says that it's from holding her husband after she found him deceased. She goes on to say that the man then took the gun, which is a revolver, that is kept under her pillow, and that is what he used when he shot Roy. She heard the gunshots, got up, ran down the hall, where she actually bumped into the intruder. He dropped the gun, she picks it up, and she fired 2 shots at him. Then he gets away. So my thought process, just by hearing all of that, going through the events that night, he attacks her, leaves her, not bound, not tied up, finds the gun under her pillow in a different room, shoots the husband, and then she bumps into him and he drops the gun.
Yes, an important note there, they were sleeping in separate but adjacent rooms. So Roy was actually recovering from a recent heart attack. He was reportedly sedated, sleeping hard. It's a 3-bedroom house. So Carolyn is sleeping in one room while Roy is recovering. Roy is in another room. And then Roy's son is in another room with his girlfriend. They did later marry, but at this point, it's his girlfriend. Now, Carolyn says this intruder was a white male. And she says, I locked the front and the back doors earlier that night, so I have no idea how this guy got in, but he got in. She also says that about 10 days before this, although she could not remember the exact day, the same man had raped her. She never said anything to anyone, family included, because she was ashamed and embarrassed. And she says this man, who was in his 20s approximately, actually got into her car at a stop sign by a park, raped her, and then left. And she also didn't want to upset her husband because he's recovering, he's got some health issues, and she didn't want to make his condition any worse. So she's like, I didn't tell anyone, but this is the same man. He found me in my home. So investigators say, look, don't shower, don't bathe, go to the hospital immediately. They want her to get an examination done. They're like, we can gather DNA evidence this way. So Carolyn goes to the hospital. However, she does not stay long enough to receive an exam. She's basically just there long enough to register that she was there, essentially.
Wait a minute. She's driving her car. Dude jumps in, rapes her, gets out. She gets back in her car, goes home, doesn't tell anybody. And then the same dude finds out where she lives.
Correct. And in fact, after the incident at the stop sign, she goes straight to work. She goes right back to work.
So while police are investigating the scene, they're looking through the house, they're looking at doors, they're looking at windows. They just cannot find any sign of forced entry. There are also no footprints in or around the house on the outside, because normally that's what they do. They look for to see a shoe impression. How did they get in? And in fact, the police call the family and say, hey, Carolyn's in the hospital. You may want to go see her. Carolyn didn't call anyone. She also didn't wait for them to arrive at the hospital. It was when the family had gotten to the hospital did they learn that Roy was dead. After leaving the hospital, the family goes back home, which is the crime scene, right? Carolyn tells them about what happened. They recall that, when she's telling this, they expected her to be upset. This just happened that night, but she was very calm in her recollection of the events. They also noted she looks pretty clean. She showered. And remember, she was told not to do that until she had the exam, but she never had the exam at the hospital. She states that there is an intruder that came through an unlocked door. But remember, she's already told the police she locked the front and the back door that night. Meanwhile, they're talking to Carolyn's son. He said that he spoke to his mom at the doorway of her bedroom earlier that evening. Now, this is the same time that she said the intruder was inside the house. But he didn't think anything was wrong. He didn't notice anything. She wasn't scared. She wasn't upset. She wasn't giving him that secret wink, wink, say something crazy. I'm being held captive at all.
And at the time of the actual shooting, his girlfriend had since left the house. So he talks to his mom at her bedroom door. Then his girlfriend leaves, and then the shooting happens. But when she is telling all this to police, she's like, oh, just before 10 o'clock is when I was in my room being raped. But her son's like, well, I came to her door right before 10 o'clock and everything seemed fine. So the detective is thinking, okay, why would an intruder and a rapist kill only one person and leave 3 other witnesses? So they ask her to take a polygraph. She refuses, but then her story changes and she says, okay, I said that the intruder was white. It was actually a black man. I was embarrassed. I did not disclose the race. So her story is now changing. Meanwhile, remember, she shows them that metal hanger. Well, they take it for testing. There is no skin or blood found on it at all whatsoever. By this point, they're like, something just isn't adding up. This is not making any sense whatsoever. You mean you're being assaulted in the house? No one knows, no one hears, no one hears. You're saying you're being tortured. There's no screaming, nothing like that. So it's just not adding up to them.
Where's the hot wax?
Very good question. So they start digging into things, and here's a big surprise. CAROLYN was the beneficiary of Roy's estate and his insurance policy, which was worth $198,000. Now, it is not abnormal for married couples to be beneficiaries on each other's life insurance, but she had just taken it out only a few months before. She did try to claim these life insurance benefits very soon after Roy's death, but Roy's children stepped in and they're contesting it, and they are taking documentation to the insurance company saying, hey, our father's murder is not solved, and the only suspect at this time is CAROLYN. Do not pay this money out. So let's just come out and say it. This all sounds like a bunch of BS, right? Well, the police feel the same, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of evidence. So for one, there's a shooting. Well, let's look at whose prints are on the gun. Well, you're going to see CAROLYN's prints on it, whether she did it or not, because it's her gun. She sleeps with it under her pillow. So any prints of hers that might be on there, it's not weird. The blood, she's covered in blood, and she says, well, I found my husband dead. I was holding him. I was shaking him, trying to wake him up. You can explain it. That happens. However, there were some people in the community who did find this story believable, and some people in the police department as well. They're like, look, it does sound a little bit weird, but there's nothing else to go on, so we can't crucify this woman when all of it is technically explainable.
And one thing I do want to interject here, her prints were on there, on the gun. There are no other prints. So if an intruder had taken the gun, even if he was wearing gloves, you would think that the prints would be smeared or there'd be overlay, there'd be additional DNA, whatever it is, but there wasn't any. And this case grows cold like so many that we've talked to before. But we're going to find out right after the break how it is solved and how it gets cracked wide open. All right, guys, welcome back from the break. Now, if you have been binge listening to us, you're going to start to see this little bitty trend. Somewhere between 2003 to 2010, all of a sudden, cold case units are popping up left and right. And this is because DNA technology has so far advanced and they are wanting to close as many cases as they can, right? In 2007, the DA office, they take a fresh look at the case. The DA is going to rerun all of these tests, and this includes a DNA test. However, these don't produce anything. Like we said, her gun, her house, she's covered, but she has an excuse for this. But among this was the underwear that had been cut off of CAROLYN after the murder, a gown that she was wearing on the night of the murder, hairs, fibers, and various debris that was recovered from a bathtub full of water after she had taken that bath to clean up. And there was also one spot of dried blood. It's a bit interesting because it doesn't show anyone else's DNA either. You'd think it would have shown assailant's DNA if there was an assault. Now remember, she said that she was tortured by a coat hanger, by hot wax. Also, she was scratched, she was raped, so you would expect his DNA somewhere under her fingernails, somewhere.
So in 2008, CAROLYN was indicted. Now, this is years later, mind you, we're 2008 now, but it was dismissed by the judge. And the thought process here for the judge was, it's been 23 years. It's been too long to bring this case to trial. Plus, since then, CAROLYN had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but she was in the very early stages. Now, this diagnosis is a big reason why, because they're like, can she recollect things properly? Is this considered a fair trial? Is she fit to stand trial? And CAROLYN says, quote, I don't understand the system. I'll never have faith in it again. I would never hurt Roy. I would never hurt my children like this. I don't understand the hate and the determination. That's what shocks me. Why don't they believe me? She said she's also still traumatized herself from the rapes. She says she often jumps when people come up behind her. She obsessively checks to make sure doors are locked. And so she's saying, look, I have suffered from this as well. Now, admittedly, not much had changed in the way of evidence, but the new DA feels that there was at least enough to go on, whereas the old DA did not. So the new test didn't turn up anything new. There's nothing groundbreaking, but this DA says that's okay. We still have enough to get an indictment here. Her legal team actually filed the motion to have this dismissed, saying that it violated her right to due process as guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment and her right to a speedy trial as guaranteed by the Sixth and 14th Amendments, and that was successful for them. So, in fact, her original attorney and the forensic examiner that had originally worked on the case had since passed away, and the car that she alleged that the first rape happened in, it was never processed at that time because she didn't report it, and they didn't find out about it until a week and a half later, so it was never processed. But that car, she didn't even have it anymore. It was not available to be processed now. So all that goes into the argument of saying, look, why do we want to spin our wheels on this? She has Alzheimer's. We don't even know if she can recollect things. The original players, 2 of them are dead, etc. And it works out for them.
A lot of people are standing by her, including a friend of hers, that friendship had spanned 30 years. And that friend said, I just can't visualize CAROLYN doing that. I don't think she would hurt anybody, much less kill her husband. I think they've made a mistake, or something somewhere is not showing up. Other people said, they made such a nice couple. Roy was a wonder. He was just a down-to-earth and nice person. I do believe she loved him, and they were happy.
I'm over this school of thought, and that sounds ugly because these people have nothing to do with it. But Ted Bundy was a nice guy. Everyone thought Ted Bundy was great, and I feel like that just is an irrelevant thing nowadays because we all know people lurk in the shadows. Everyone has skeletons in the closet, and they just don't seem like that type of person. A lot of them don't. John Wayne Gacy didn't. That's completely irrelevant these days. I hate that line of thinking. I get it because we don't want to admit that someone that we feel like we knew so well could do that, but it doesn't. And I feel this way about character witnesses as well. I've always thought this for as long as I can remember. Someone coming up and saying, oh, he was so nice to me. She was so nice to me. Well, that doesn't mean they didn't kill someone. Or on the flip side, they're a horrible person. They were mean to me one time. Well, that doesn't mean they are a murderer.
No, I totally get it. You don't know a person what happens behind the doors of their own house. You never know what a person is capable of until you're in that moment with them. With all that being said about character witnesses, it is a point to say that no one can speak to any signs of marital trouble or abuse. In 2013, a ruling was actually reversed. Even her own attorney admitted that she was still sound of mind at this time. For example, she's going to drive herself to and from court. She even participated in her own defense. And she's doing so with a clear mind, cognitive ability, and it's saying a lot about where she is in the process of Alzheimer's disease. They also found that some of the original players had passed away. Now, they're losing a lot of these key witnesses, right? They were able to locate almost all of the current and former retired police officers who were at the crime scene or investigated the case in 1985. They're also able to speak with 5 witnesses listed in the offense report who lived or had lived on the street where they lived, like where CAROLYN and Roy and her son lived, as well as Carl Fuller. Now, Carl is a friend of the family who had been at the scene earlier that day.
So they made this whole argument about the original investigators passed away, someone else passed away, but this DA, the new DA, is like, fine, but we do still have this person, this person, this person, this person, this person, and this person, so we're outnumbered, we're good. Please continue. So they do decide to proceed. CAROLYN is now facing life in prison. And faced with this, she confesses to the crime in exchange for a lighter sentence. Now, buckle up here. So, facing life in prison, right? Age 71, December 26th, the day after Christmas, 2013, CAROLYN begins her sentence. What is that sentence? What did she get, you ask? 6 months in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. 6 months, not years, months. Now, this is due in large part to her deteriorating health and the fact that she does have Alzheimer's, even though she was able to participate in her own defense and all that. And naturally, Roy's family felt that this was way too lenient, but they were really glad to get the actual confession and get that closure. And Roy's daughter said, I don't think justice was served. The only piece I get out of it is she finally admitted to what we knew she had done. She is willingly admitting that she murdered him, and that's something we've known all these years. I think that means more to me than anything. And finally, when asked about her father, Roy's daughter said, my daddy was the life of the party. People were drawn to him. He didn't think he was better than anybody else. He was a good man.
So let's talk about CAROLYN a little bit. She's kind of a dark character in our story in this episode. She had left her previous husband. Now, when she left, she took a tax refund check in the amount of $4,000. She cut and run. And in fact, a few years later, she was charged with bigamy. That's when you're married to more than one person at a time. Now, the allegations that she married Roy before divorcing her husband, which would have been her fifth husband? Roy was her sixth. So she had been married, quote unquote, married, time after time after time, sometimes forgetting to get divorced from the originals. Now, sources do vary, but some say the charges were dropped. Some say she was convicted. Now, there's a big difference here, but we're somewhat confident in saying that they were dropped because the legal document briefly references this. She first gets married at the age of 18 in 1960. Several ex-husbands would not talk about her. At least one said that she could get very, very jealous when he hung out with his children. And she was also quite vindictive. She was also very difficult to live with, and she was money hungry. This is a quote. It says, we met one night at the Horseshoe Bar in Waco on Highway 84. The first night I talked to her in that bar, she was sweet, she's innocent, she's lovable. But after me and her and the boys got together, she was a living hell. I would never bring home enough money to satisfy her.
This same ex also said that he hadn't heard from her in years, but then he got this really weird and threatening call from her. And he says that she was telling him, you better not open your mouth because I'm supposed to get a big insurance settlement. And she then goes on to tell him that if he messed up her life, she would see to it that he wound up dead. And he's like, well, I haven't talked to you in years. Why are you calling me, telling me about a big insurance payout and basically telling me not to mess it up for you? I wouldn't have even known about it if you didn't call me just now. What do you think? How am I going to mess that up for you? And then she's threatening him and saying, if you do, you'll end up dead. So he thinks it's out of the blue. But then a few days later, he gets a call from an investigator who tells him about Roy being murdered. And he's like, wait a minute. Something here doesn't add up. So Roy's family describes CAROLYN as having been, quote, standoffish and distant. And Roy had a disabled son who felt so unwelcome by her that he actually moved out. This son had the same disease that Roy's daughter had, who passed, and his son had lost his ability to walk on his own. And so he moves in with them when they get married and tells his sister, I don't like her. She's making me uncomfortable. She makes me feel like I shouldn't be here, like I'm a burden, which is absolutely horrible. He can't walk, and now he's having to move out and find somewhere else to live. So let's go back to this first alleged rape for a second, because I want to be clear. It's not uncommon for someone not to report an assault, so we're not minimizing that at all. For legitimate victims, that is. But just to set the record straight, she used to work for the police department. Remember, she was in a civilian role. One of her sons was a Houston police officer, and another one of her sons was in the police academy. So she could have reported this. She knew how to do it. Now, I could see where someone would be potentially embarrassed to report that to a family member or whatever, but she herself used to work there. She knew the process and how that could or should go. Also, keep in mind, her husband has just had a heart attack. Now, all of a sudden, just a week and a half to 2 weeks later, this happens. It almost seems like she was not thrilled that the heart attack didn't solve the problem. And so then this whole story starts to unfold about the intruder, and that's why she shot him. And then to add some, legitimacy to it, she's like, oh, and it happened 10 days before as well.
Also, I want to point out that, her previous ex-husbands mentioned they could never bring home enough money. He can't work recovering from a heart attack. Could that have been a trigger? Because now she's seeing him unrightfully so. I mean, absolutely horrific for her to think this is he can't make money now. Well, he works construction.
Well, and not only that, so he had the heart attack, but he had also had recent back surgery as well. So that could play into it, that he wasn't able to work. And you're right, he worked in construction where if he was out of work, he was out of work. It's not necessarily like he's getting paid per the job. And if he's not on the job, he's not getting paid.
Exactly.
So, and another thing I come back to is she says she's tortured with hot wax and a coat hanger, but no one hears anything. The hanger has no DNA evidence on it. There's no sign of wax anywhere. And this guy comes in. He's not wearing shoes. She says she thinks he's homeless. He's not wearing shoes, but he's wearing gloves. And he had a knife on him, but then he used a gun to commit the murder. It's all very...
He used a gun that he did not know that was in the house under a pillow in the room with one of his so-called victims. If he had no shoes on and no socks on, presumably, would there not be traces of the hot wax, her blood, her DNA? I think her story is just so ludicrous to even start with. We know she did it.
And she admitted to it.
Yeah. She confessed to it. But her story is ridiculous. And the whole car situation, the 10 days prior, being raped in the car, but then you go to work. I think she was just piling it on for the victimization. Feel bad for me, feel sorry for me, divert your suspicions away from me.
And he just happened to find your house, too. He didn't know anything about you. If he just came in the car at a stop sign, he doesn't know your name. I mean, I guess you could have asked, but then he is able to find it.
Let's go back to the scratches. She had them, but there's no DNA on the hanger, so how did she get them? And where are the burns on her skin? Because no one mentioned about first degree, second degree, or even third degree burns on her.
Yeah. And basically, they learned through her story that the scratches were self-inflicted. She did it herself and then blamed it on the hanger. And she also shoots at this intruder. He drops the gun. She picks up the gun and shoots at him twice. There should be evidence of that. There should be bullets in the wall. There should be gun residue on the wall, on her hand. There's none of that. I mean, they're able to pick this apart so cleanly because it's just ludicrous. And she actually did appear on an episode of Snapped, which I think this is very fitting for that. But an interesting note about the insurance. So after a 2.5-year court battle, there actually was a $48,000 payout by the insurance company that was split, with CAROLYN getting about $19,000 and his children getting more than $21,000. There were some smaller amounts that went to the cemetery, funeral home, insurance company. Not sure if that had to be paid back by her later or not once she actually confessed and was found guilty of the crime. I wonder if they had to pay it back. But also that whole policy and the estate was worth $198,000. So also not sure where the rest of it went, but the most she would have gotten is $19,000 and not sure if she had to pay that back or not. I would imagine they made her pay it back.
I don't know. Since it's been so many years, I don't know if they would. I don't think, I mean, she could claim out of everything, she's 71, she's retired, she's not working. I don't think restitution was a part of the jail sentence. It just sounded like probation and 6 months.
That's another thing to me, is they said you're fit to stand trial. You are driving, you're helping in your own representation, you have been deemed competent. But then they say, but we're going to give you 6 months because of your diagnosis. It's just weird that they took that approach after saying that she wasn't far enough into it and she was in the early stages and she was still good to go. It seems very strange.
Yeah, but that's going to wrap up this side of the story. Stay tuned. On your screen right now, if you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to see the QR code for Rocky. Go ahead and scan that QR code. What that's going to take you to is our episodes that are dedicated just to Rocky, some letters, some templates for letters that you can also fill out if you feel driven to want to hear all those stories. And there's a lot of extra information out there. For those that don't know, we are here to support Rocky. It is our Road to Redemption series. Rocky is just this amazing, sweet, see, I'm doing my character reference that we hate.
Yep.
Yeah, we believe he's innocent, but we're asking for clemency, which will give him life in prison instead of sitting on death row where he is today.
Yes. And taking character witness out, because he is a wonderful, sweet person, but that doesn't mean anything. Looking at actual facts and actual evidence, there's not any, which is why we believe that he is innocent. So, yeah.
Oh, and don't forget, if you are in the Birmingham area around May 6th, Lindsay and I are doing a live panel show. It is at the Wild Rose Cafe here in Birmingham. It's in Bluff Park area. We've got some great panelists that are going to be joining us. We will release those names soon. We want to make sure we can get everyone in and get a set schedule before we just stop or start name dropping. But we're super excited. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, you will see the link. It is patreon.com/Corpus Delicti. If you go ahead and click that link and you become a delectable, we will go ahead and give you access to our every month live shows via Zoom, where you can join us in a real telling or a live telling of one of our stories that you hear on the podcast. And we participate with you after the end of every one of those. And it's like a 30-minute chat session. We get to know you. You get to know us. If you want to, feel free. If not, just hang on the line. We have some really great conversations. If you donate $3 or more, you get on our Discord page. Now, our Discord is an app that you can download on your phone. It is a chat thing that we have several different chat threads going on. It's so much fun. $10 or more gets you this really cool delectable box. Now, the delectable boxes come to your house at the end of each quarter, so in the third month of each quarter, and they can vary from true crime merch, our merch, or just something totally random.
So we will actually have the first one coming out in March, and I think we've got an idea for what it'll be. I mean, nothing, crazy or elaborate, but we wanted to find a way to, have some unique stuff happening for our top tier on Patreon. So we're excited about that. But we will do this month's Patreon live show event Tuesday, February 28th, 7 o'clock Central Time. Y'all probably know the drill by now, but just in case you're new, the link gets posted about 30 minutes before the event. You'll get an email about it, or you can just check Patreon, join the link, and we'll hang out. So February 28th, 7 p.m. It's always a pretty good time. We do try to post it afterwards. I will say in January we didn't, because Jen's phone number ended up on the screen, so I did not post the video playback of that. But most of the time, if you can't attend, you will still get to go back and listen to it. We actually have another episode to record. We're trying to do a binge session here, so we are going to hop over to a new screen on